34-10, the Blues got it done. Origin 2, Brendan Bradford, Lachlan McCurdy. Guys, initial thoughts. What happened there? Was that Queensland? Were they just having a massively off night, or is this kind of what we should have expected? BB, I'll start with you.
Queensland were bad. Let's not beat around the bush. They dropped a lot of ball. They missed a lot of tackles. They were outnumbered on defence a lot. I don't think that's the measure of that team. I think they had an off night. The Blues were very good on the other hand. Cody Walker and Nathan Cleary, sensational in the halves. Cleary bouncing back in a big way. Isaac Yeo off the bench. Lots of good Blues players. They were a lot better than last week, and Queensland were a lot worse than last week. It's going to be really interesting game 3 to see how it all sort of levels out.
What about you, Locke? What's your take?
I just think Queensland lost so much momentum when Cameron Munster went off the field, and it showed just how important he was to their attack. I mean, he went off within the first 3 minutes, and as soon as he didn't come back on the field, it was clear that their attack was completely disjointed. While they obviously scored that early try, that incredible try to Xavier Coates in the corner, beyond that, they just didn't really look like making too much of an impact. I think their only other try to Josh Papali was sort of just a bad read in defence on the left-hand side by Cody Walker. Daly Cherry Evans just had too much to do by himself without Cameron Munster there. And I think that made a big difference because Cleary and Cody Walker, they clicked in the halves, and New South Wales, they just were too good in the end.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Also, just on Xavier Coates, how good is it handicapping a young bloke by calling him, a young GI, or the next GI? And it's worked so well. We should definitely keep doing it.
It's the next Peter Sterling for any Parramatta half. Just put the mocker on him.
The only thing I'd say about, Queensland, were they undercooked or whatever, was it seems like New South Wales kind of, for once, actually followed a game plan. They did, for a lot of the first half, go towards Queensland's left edge, which was having an extraordinarily bad night. When you had Ben Hunt, Kurt Capewell, and Philip Samuel lining up against each other, who probably all didn't have their best defensive night. But full credit to New South Wales. Whereas in game 1, they went away from that a lot. It seemed like in game 2, they just focused on that, and obviously it reached huge benefits for them.
I think the first 3 Blues tries, you just see Ben Hunt just either falling off shoulders or skating sideways like he was. I don't know whether it was all his fault. Like, there was a lot going wrong on that edge for Queensland, but that's sort of like the memory, the image of that first half is just Ben Hunt just being in all sorts and all over the joint.
While saying that, I have a begrudging respect for how Capo was defending. He's kind of got that all or nothing defensive mindset. He just goes hammers that defensive line. And you know what? A lot of the time, he absolutely got Gutherson before anything could happen. He shut a lot down. Sometimes it didn't work as well.
Particularly with that Cody Walker try, where I think that's where you saw like a little bit of that, and just a little bit of that uncertainty that Kate was going to go out, is not going to go out. There's gaps there, which was absent for that game 1 when Cleary and Keary, they weren't running that much, and there wasn't that threat, especially with the second ball player when Cody Walker came in.
Did it feel like a little bit more of an Origin type atmosphere for you guys? I mean, Locke, you were actually at the game. What was it like?
The noise was certainly a good level. I think it definitely felt like it was a bit more of an Origin, New South Wales fans, a bit more parochial. Speaking to some of the players post-match, they certainly felt that way. I think Jamie Cook said it was nice to be in front of some home fans to give it that bit of an Origin atmosphere. And I think it certainly felt like a bit more of an Origin performance from the New South Wales boys. I think compared to last week, they took their foot off the throat last week a little bit in terms of that halftime score, and Wayne obviously had that inspirational halftime talk. Whereas this week, Freddie's boys, they just weren't going to let it go, and that was clear when they scored within a couple of minutes after halftime. They wanted a good performance. They wanted to set the record straight, and I think their fans at ANZ Stadium certainly helped that last night, because even though there are only about 36,000 there, they certainly made their noise.
BB, you hate end of season Origin. What was last night like for you?
It was better. It felt like more like an Origin. It still feels like post-season footy, like an extra, like a nice to have. I think, like I said last week. So I think the 3 weeks, but mid-season, where you don't have daylight saving, there's not shield cricket on, where you're just focused on this. The build-up is proper. The build-up is right. I think that's going to be the key. But it was still a lot better than the week before. The spectacle, the game, the whole thing last week was I think we said it was trash. Last night was pretty good.
Yeah, I think for all the sooking I had last week, I mean, obviously, the level of play probably wasn't, like peak golden era for Queensland, where if anyone makes a mistake, the other team's going to score. But it seemed like the intensity, especially in the second half, it was kind of there. So it was a marked improvement, I thought. There's something to like. Hopefully it continues in game 3. Sure it will up at Suncorp, you'd think. But I just want to talk a little bit about Nathan Cleary, especially Nathan Cleary's kicking game. For me, I thought, apart from the forwards, that was kind of the big talking point. I thought he was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think just he controlled the game so well and so easily. I mean, when you've got Gus Gould on Twitter straight away praising his kicking game so much throughout the game, I think he was saying kick, early kick. And that was clearly New South Wales' plan. Not only was he kicking to find ground, but he was kicking to find Josh Adokar, putting it over the back of Phillip Sammy on numerous occasions. There was one time, I think towards the end of the first half, Josh Adokar was nowhere near in position. He was about 10 metres back from the play, and Cleary put a kick in over Phillip Sammy's head, and he still almost got there to score the try. It was quite incredible, just not only Adokar's pace, but the placement of Cleary's kicks were just perfect because it put so much pressure on Queensland's back 3 to try and get the ball back. And poor Phillip Sammy, it's not a night that he'd want to relive anytime soon, especially that one in the second half where for some reason he got back up and he just got monstered over the touchline.
The kick return meters was a huge thing. I might just hit you with some stats here, thanks to Repco. Starts with the parts. 283 kick return meters for the Blues compared to 46 for Queensland. I thought it was pretty bad. I didn't think it was going to be the difference would be that much. But I mean, once you go looking back at it, there was no 20, 30 meter consistency in terms of kick returns for the Maroons. Not that I remember, at least.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword as well. Munster's kicker game was underrated. Last week in Adelaide, he put in, it was like maybe 10 minutes to go, and he put in just this beautiful angle cross-field kick to the left and just pinned New South Wales down that end. They just didn't have that last night. Ben Hunt, he was off last night. Daly Cherry Evans had too much to do. And just the intensity of that the Blues chase, Adokar, even Tedesco as well was putting in some big meters. I think he ran for, was it like 6.4 Ks or something like that, and sprinting for about 400 meters over the night. So, one of the indicators of the difference between game 1 and game 2.
One of the big things that we talked about after Origin 1, Lindsay Collins and help me out here, who was the other one who was on the Maroons bench who was killing it?
Jairo,
thank you. Both over 100 metres in short minutes as well. Lindsay Collins only played like 32 minutes. Last night you had Zayo, Finucane, both topping 100 metres. Nathan Brown was effective in a really short amount of time. Obviously, they had different roles there, but I thought that was probably in the second half. That was what really put the Blues ahead of the Maroons. I thought the Maroons weren't great coming off the bench.
New South Wales' bench, they were just so impressive. And Freddie clearly had a different game plan for them because you could see Queensland made those changes a little bit earlier this week because they knew they didn't have the momentum, whereas Freddie was patient. He let sort of the likes of Payne Haas, he let the likes of Daniel Saifidis have their time in that first half and then brought them on with about 10 minutes to go in that first half. And they just caused havoc because they were relentless up the middle. I think you mentioned, obviously, Isaiah Yeo. He was really impressive in his Origin debut. I thought he just hit the ball up hard at 110% every time he got it. Dal Finucane, obviously, we know what to expect from him now. He's a multiple premiership winner, and he was just fantastic. But Nathan Brown, he had to wait. He had to wait until about the 55th, 60th minute for his first run. But that was worth it. I mean, he just flattened Jake Friend. Absolutely flattened him. That was a pretty good way to welcome yourself to the Origin arena, I thought.
Yeah, I rated him. I was a little bit worried at first with the raised elbow. Like, oh no. Yeah. He's on for 2 minutes and then he's straight off. But he was fantastic. And then you look at the actual stats just of the entire pack. They had 650 more, or actually a little bit more, running meters than Queensland. So not only did they run the hell out of the ball, but they defended really well as well, which obviously gave Cleary all that room. I just want to hit you with another stat in terms of completion rate. But 89% for the Blues, And then the Maroons all the way down at 73. 73 are an NRL game. That's not unheard of, especially if you're a Cronulla Shark supporter. That's pretty much par. But in Origin, you can't let that happen.
Inexcusable. It's not like they were forcing things. Like they weren't trying to make it. It was just passes not going hand, passes going behind people, passes going over people's shoulders or to their knees, to their legs. Honestly, at times in the second half, it was getting painful to watch the Queensland attack. Was it 73% completion rate? Yeah, you're lucky to win NRL games. You're never, ever going to come close to winning an Origin game with that stat.
Do you reckon they'll improve by game 3? This is assuming Munster plays.
Yeah, I think BB's right. Like it hopefully can't get worse for them. But I think a big change was Jake Friend had a good game 1. I think his attack obviously caught all the headlines. His defense rather caught all the headlines, but he was maybe a little bit quieter in attack. He did his job. I thought this week he was really found out in attack. He just didn't steer the team around the park as well as Damien Cook. Like you can see the difference in the contrasting styles of their 2 games. And I think it'll leave Wayne Bennett with a real choice that despite Friend's massive work that he does in defence, will they need something else in attack? And I think Harry Grant could be an option for game 3 up in Suncorp because they just need something else out of dummy half because Friend isn't going to spark that sort of quick attacking play down the blind side or anything like that. Whereas Harry Grant, that's something that New South Wales would fear. They wouldn't know what to expect. And I think that's something more suited for Origin than Jake Friend.
I think one thing's certainly clear that if it's just going to be DCE in terms of an attacking threat, Ben Hunt had a bad night. He'll definitely be better for it in game 3. But if it's just DCE carrying the load, Queensland cannot compete.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Munster as well. Over the next week, we saw a couple of guys, Boyd Cordner, out for the series. Obviously, he's got a long history of concussions and head knocks, but we saw that Munster didn't actually fail his HIA, but they pulled him out of the game because he was wobbly. I think he failed like the first thing that they even looked for. So it'd be interesting to see whether they push him to come back to the decider or whether they sit him out. That's going to have I think that's probably the biggest call over the next week. This is going to be the thing that we're going to be talking about for the next 6 days, 7 days.
What a lot of people are talking about today, and we've waited for a little bit. There was an Origin fight. BB, did you like it or did you love it?
I did. Yeah, both liked and loved it. I didn't think I was going to. We saw a couple of stories in the lead up about bring back the biff, bring back the hate, and the game isn't the same without it. And I was like, no, that is absolute rubbish. You don't need it. And then once it kicked off, yeah, I was into it. A good set too. Good couple of youngsters throwing hands. And saying that, that probably should be rubbed out for game 3. Like you can't just let that go just because it's Origin and just because we missed it. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and you can't have it both ways. So good to see, but there's got to be consequences.
The good thing is they're only 20. Like this is going to happen for the next 6 years at least. So.
And the thing I love about it is that a little bit of Broncos Titans there. We'll probably see that at club level now that both those guys are up there. But the red herring that Wayne Bennett sold last night, they wouldn't have punched on if they hadn't read the headline in the Courier Mail overnight. That's ridiculous. That's a great deflection from Wayne.
He's a genius.
The best.
Suddenly no one's talking about how poor Queensland were last night, and they're all talking about, how dare Wayne blame the media for this. It's typical Wayne, and it's why he's the best master coach, because A, there's no way 2 20-year-olds are reading newspapers, and B, they're not influenced by that. If they're on the field, they wouldn't care less. I know Payne Haas was saying to reporters last night he hadn't even seen the headline. So, yeah, I think a classic red herring from Wayne, who deflecting a little bit from his team, but obviously it was good to see a little bit of the biff back. But, yeah, I agree with BB. I think if the NRL's serious, they shouldn't be playing game 3.
I do very much enjoy how sheepish everyone gets when they talk about it. You're like, I don't know. I don't want to promote it, but gee whiz, it was good. What I did love was DCE absolutely spraying Tino in the sheds. I I know DCE came out and said, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Players, blah, blah, whatever. No, I love it. I don't. If you're a Queenslander, I don't understand how you don't love Daly Cherry Evans. He is.
What do you think he really did say to him?
Oh, I think this is the Disney version, but essentially, pull your head in. You know, we were down a man because of you. Blah blah blah. I mean, I know Morans did score straight afterwards through Papali, bit of a consolation try, but that's what I would assume.
I think Daly does have a point, though, if that is what he said and you are the lip reader that we believe you all are, because Queensland were getting a bit of momentum back at that point. They were in the attacking half. I think they got a penalty and they got a bit of a roll on. So it definitely changed the momentum a bit. It all started because Nathan Brown was kicking the ball away a little bit, doing typical Nathan Brown thing. Jake Friend gave him a little bit of a tap in the head. And so Payne Haas and Tino weren't even involved in the little fracas. But yeah, it was something that easily could have been avoided. And who knows, because Queensland were certainly getting on top. So I feel like Daly has a right to sort of be a bit annoyed at Tino for sort of losing his cool a bit there, because who knows what could have happened if Papali scores that try and they have 13 on the field. It could be a different ballgame that last 20 minutes.
I like to think that Daly was coming in with a bit of old school and said, you know, mate, if you're going to walk in from 20 metres away, you finish the job. None of this bullshit. Rip shirt, garbage, finish it.
Anyway, if you're going to be walking, you know, off a field in front of 36,000 people, you want to have the chassis that Payne Haas does with like.
Yeah. You see, I reckon he was looking at the screen to see if when he was on TV before he did the come over. I think he was looking at me. Come over. It was brilliant theatre.
20 years old. How good? How good?
All right, next week, the Blues haven't won a decider since like 2005 at Suncorp. Will they win Game 3? Lucky?
Yes.
Ooh.
Oh, I dropped the gun. Sorry.
You go, BB. You go. You're key.
Yeah, I think they will. Pick and stick. There's a few issues there with the Blues. I don't know whether they have any injury concerns, but that same team, 2 games to go into the third game. Everything's sticking all right. I still have issues with the centres, but why would you change it now? And I think there's a lot more concern within that Queensland squad. Munster is the big one. If he's out, I think it could be a long night for Queensland fans, but I think the Blues will get it done.
I think for me, Cleary was just so good. He's finally got that monkey off his back in terms of try assists and line breaks and all those sort of stats that people were saying he was on donuts until last night. But I think the big thing was New South Wales back 3. Tedesco, he's as good as we always expect. But Daniel Tupou had one of the best nights for a winger I think you'll ever see. He was just a menace carrying the ball back. Josh Adokar was obviously brilliant as well, scoring a couple of tries. I just think they're the big difference between the two teams at the moment, as you mentioned, with the kick return meters, and they're only going to get better. And sure, Queensland, they've been riled up by headlines saying they're the worst Queensland team ever, but that only carries so far. And I think Wayne was right saying they got a bit ahead of themselves last night, got too caught up in the momentum from winning game 1. And I think no matter how many people pack Suncorp Stadium, that New South Wales will just prove to be too good next Wednesday.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the back 3 and probably the forwards will just be that little bit too strong. All right, thanks to Repco. It starts with the parts. That's it for us. Join us next Thursday. We will either toast or commiserate the end of Origin. And finally, thankfully, the end of footy season. See you then.